Welcome to the Startups and AI podcast. Today I'm joined by Tony Redondo, who's the founder of Cosmos Currency Exchange. Welcome to the show, Tony. I'd love to learn a bit more about what you've been building at Cosmos, and what's the most unique part about what you've built there.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world, and thank you very much for the invite. So I launched Cosmos in 2020. We're currency brokers, and there's lots of us around the world. The world is not short, clients are not short of currency payment solutions these days with banks and online brokers and lots of payment apps. The difference with Cosmos is that we take the human-led approach. Of course, we use technology, but we use technology behind the scenes. All client contact is human-led, and we start off, all our business comes from word-of-mouth referrals. So we don't do pay-per-click, we don't do advertising or marketing. We then do a discovery call with each client to find out about their requirements, their priorities, and put together a currency payment solution that fits their criteria rather than offering up just another one-size-fits-all reactive platform where the client has to self-service. You can get that anywhere, but I felt there was a gap in the market. Not because our type of service isn't available, it is, but it's only available typically if you are either a high net worth individual or running a business with a £5 million plus turnover. Then you get personal service. But I just felt, what about the majority of us who are not a high net worth individual, who are not running a huge corporation? And I just felt after a long 35-year corporate career that there was a gap in the markets and set up Cosmos in 2020.
Awesome. Well, it's super interesting because in the industry, you hear things about, even sales agents who are going to be AI, who are going to talk to customers. But your approach is more personalized, and you found like a really good niche in the market. What happened after you found the niche? Did you face some challenges in getting customers, or how did you get your first word out, and what was that process like?
Sure. Well, I mean, I was lucky in that I'd been, in banking and finance for 35 years, and I'd always managed to take quite a few of my clients from job to job. So I didn't start from a blank sheet of paper. I started with, a black book of contacts that in some cases I had for over 20 years. So that was helpful. What wasn't so helpful and was a bit of a challenge, as it turned out, is of course none of us are clairvoyant. So I actually launched Cosmos 6 weeks before the COVID lockdown struck. So my timing was interesting, shall we say. But actually, having survived it, it was probably the best thing that could have happened to us because it very quickly illustrated that there was a gap in the market because the banking system started to fall apart in certain aspects. And the one particular aspect that we came across time and again in 2020 was a scenario of international trade, where, for example, you might have a British or European company exporting to North America. And they've been doing it for years and using the normal banks or payment apps. And everything had been working well until COVID struck. And then all of a sudden, the payments are not coming through. And all of a sudden, clients are spending a lot of time on the telephone to a bank call center, trying to understand what's happening, why it's happening, what the solution is, and generally speaking, getting a pretty rubbish service with a very small s. Luckily for me, I have an unusual surname, and it's not difficult to find me on LinkedIn or Google or what have you. I've been around a long time as well, which helps. And so, at least in our experience, the phone just started to ring with calls from ex-clients of mine throughout my career, very frustrated at not understanding what was happening and trying to get answers. And we very quickly worked out that one of the major glitches during COVID is online. We're so used in the UK to doing everything online. You go on your payment app in the UK and you can send money anywhere. You can do lots and lots of things. So we automatically assume that it's the same around the world. And it isn't. And what we quickly find out is that in a lot of countries around the world, including Canada, including the US, including Australia, amongst many others, online banking does exist, but only works domestically. So paying your supplier in the UK was working well when the banks were open. But of course, when the banks shut down because of COVID lockdowns, all of a sudden the payment can't be transacted. It just can't happen. There is no mechanism in place. But because the days when bank managers were bank managers who people could get hold of and have conversations with, nobody was explaining anything to anybody. So we had a lot of frustrated clients not understanding why they weren't getting paid, not getting real answers from the bank call centers. And we were able to, first of all, explain what was happening. And then secondly, it was already in our plans. We just accelerated the plans at that time, was the idea of making life as convenient as possible for clients and their clients. And one of the ways you can do that in the payment industry is by having as many local collection accounts as possible. So all of a sudden, a British company can register for an account with Cosmos. And if they pick up a client in Canada, we can give them a local Canadian account inside Canada to quote on their invoice, to collect the funds through. Makes life very, very simple for the importer because they don't have to go to the bank. They can just go online and move the money to another Canadian account. We collect the funds and we convert back when the client is happy with the exchange rate, not automatically. And that's really important in the payments industry because doing things automatically is great for the broker. Makes life easy. You set up the system and it works. No input needed, no rate watching, no dialogue with the client. Very, very simple way of making money. But it's not great for the clients because they get no guidance and the Canadian dollars arrive today and they get converted today. Trouble is, from the client's perspective, it could be that the client is in no rush whatsoever. It could be that, but they don't get a choice with automated systems. It just happens. Whereas with us, it happens when they're happy with the exchange rate. So we can sit on the funds in a protected client account. So the funds are always ring fenced in their client segregated accounts in accordance with FCA guidelines. The FCA is the UK regulator, the Financial Conduct Authority, and we will monitor the markets within each client's chosen time frame. And when there's an advantageous rate opportunity, we alert the client, and when they're happy with it, we press the button, convert the funds, and then credit their base account. So it's a much more personalized service. And every year that's gone by, there's always been something major happening. So 2020, when we launched, it was COVID. 2021 was the finalization of Brexit, which obviously changed a lot of things particularly between the UK and Europe. 2022, we had the Russian invasion of the Ukraine, and then we had the Truss mini budget meltdown in the UK, and it's gone on. 2023 was October the 7th, and it goes and it goes. So there's always been lots and lots of things happening during the time that Cosmos has been around since 2020.
It's an amazing story. And I think I really love a lot of things about it. One, you talked about timing, which a lot of entrepreneurs can learn from that. If you're out there, you could be very well positioned when the time is right. So the first thing is putting yourself out there. And then also, I love the fact that, there's that personalization, there's that human contact with the customer, which I think maybe this current generation is losing a bit because I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Like, in your experience, what are you seeing in the younger generation? Because you've been working from the time when the technology was not as advanced, and now, everything is digital. Are you seeing the current generation losing some of that human, face-to-face skills?
Sure, absolutely. So, first of all, you're very kind. I actually started my career long before technology existed. Okay, never mind, it wasn't as advanced. There were no computers, there was no email, there was no internet, there was no credit scoring. I started my career in 1985 in the city of London. So, really, for the first 10 years of my career, there was next to no technology. And then all of a sudden it came in. And, technology has been great in lots of ways. It's been great for speeding things up. The days when you sent a check to somebody in a snail mail are long gone. So it's been good for that. Technology has been good for bringing competition. Again, when I started in the City of London, there were four main banks in the UK. Four. That's it. Now there are over 650 banks in a square mile of the City of London. So
Wow.
and that kind of competition is good for clients. I contrast it all the time with the situation, say, in the States or in Canada or in Australia, where it's still to this day four or five banks dominate a 90% market share. And therefore there isn't so much competition. In terms of age of clients, it's really, really interesting. What we find is the majority of our clients are aged 40 plus. And I think at the end of the day, it's a very simple sell for us. All I've really got to say to somebody aged over the age of 40 is, do you remember the days when bank managers were bank managers? And they can relate to it. They go, yeah, I can tell you what happened to that, but that's what we're about. Whereas if I say the same to somebody in their 20s or early 30s, they're nonplussed. And of course they're nonplussed because they've never had it. Unless they happen to be a high net worth individual or running a £5 million plus business, then they're used to personal service. But the vast majority are not because their natural default is technology, because that's all they're used to. And again, particularly focusing in on the payment industry, if you've got a very plain vanilla situation, for example, Gaurav, you might have a bank account in your name in Canada and a bank account in your name in India, and you want to move some funds between the two. You don't really need me for that. You can go that anywhere. Unless it's a very big amount, you don't really need me for that because it's such a plain vanilla transaction. Both accounts are in your name, a smallish amount, you can get that anywhere. But there are lots and lots of situations in life where it might not be plain vanilla, either because of the amounts involved, either because of the sector involved, either because of the countries involved. There might be an element of third-party payments. There might be an element of high-risk countries or high-risk sectors. And then all of a sudden, these fully automated systems start to creak a bit. And what you really need is that old-fashioned talk to a human being who can say to you, right, you've got a client in Africa, for argument's sake. It's doable, but it's going to be high risk. What does that mean? It means we're going to need more documentation, or we might even need certified documentation. There might be instances where it's not doable. There might be instances where it is doable, but not in the national currency of that country. It's doable in US dollars, for example, rather than the local currency. But I'm sure one day, probably not that far off, the technology will pick up to the point where you can have a conversation with an AI agent who will be able to pick up the nuances of this. I'm pretty sure that will happen, but at the moment, it's not available. And so I always say to people, look, Cosmos isn't the right answer for everybody,
Hmm.
and that's fine. We don't want to be. We're not high volume brokers. What we are is
Absolutely.
if you have a particular requirement that requires a human dialogue, or you like the human dialogue, then we're a solution, a potential solution for people.
Amazing. Yeah, that's where product market fit comes in, and you've definitely found the right customers for your solution, and you have a clear vision for that, and that's what, makes it amazing. Yeah, you brought up a lot of good points on, maybe in future AI would be able to do it. So what are your thoughts on that? Like, what challenges do you see with AI gaining a lot of traction? Do you think like in future you want to start adopting that, or you want to stick to your, values per se? What do you think the future holds?
Well, for Cosmos, we have found a niche, but the niche has evolved over the last 5 years. Really, when I look back in 2020, our offer was all about personal service and relationship bank. Then we started looking, and we've added layer upon layer upon layer. And it's only recently that we can now offer 7 local collection accounts, in Canada, in the US, in Australia, Singapore, Hong Kong, the UK, and Europe. Until 2 years ago, it was the big three: euro, dollar, and pound, US dollar and pound. So every year the idea behind Cosmos is not static. I believe in our values. I think we found a niche, and I have no plans to change that. And goodness, have 100 hologramic, Tonys out there. I think one's enough, to be honest. Or at least my wife tells me. But doesn't mean the business is static. I use, and my team uses AI every day. We just use it behind the scenes. We use it for research. We use it for things that are take a lot of time manually, but require no customer contact. So behind the scenes, admin
Yeah,
tasks, research task, if you will. If I want to write a blog on something, if I want to write an article on something, rather than do my own research in my own time that I've done forever, we find AI is a fantastic research tool and gets rid of lots and lots of drudgery. Lots and lots of drudgery. It is a fantastic tool, but it definitely needs human supervision. And I think that's really important for two reasons. Number one is because it's an evolving technology, you don't want it to hallucinate. And the only way to make sure it doesn't hallucinate is to have that human oversight. But secondly, it's a tool. It hasn't got thinking capacity yet. So therefore, I think it's important for the human who's using the AI to have the right mindset. It's not a god. It is a very advanced tool. It's a very fast tool. It's almost unbeatable when it comes to research. If I say, if I want to work out, I remember before AI, if I wanted to work out what the average Bank of England base rate was since the end of the Second World War, I would have to look at various different graphs, go into the Bank of England website, go into different places to try and piece together information, manually calculate it, or use an Excel spreadsheet. Now I go to an AI and go, but it's the prompt that's important. The tighter I make the prompt, the better quality the information comes back. So you can't just say, what's the average interest rate? Because the computer's going to go interest rate for what? For mortgages? For which country? Over what time period? You've got to ask it some very specific questions, and you'll come back with some fantastic specific information. The looser you make the question, the more chances of hallucination.
yeah,
So it's really
yeah. So
important.
yeah, yeah, definitely. So AI might not be replacing humans, but it definitely makes human maybe 2 times, 5 times more productive.
Oh, absolutely.
Even if you want to be face to face with customers, have that personalization in the background, AI can make you
Oh,
maybe instead of hiring 10 people, now you could do the same work with just 3 or 4 people. And
that's
also
exactly
the
what's happened with us, Gaurav. That's exactly what's happened with us. We have a very, very small team in terms of number of humans, but that's because we were early advocates of using AI behind the scenes. And again, I'd love to say that I'm a visionary and I picked up on the AI 5 years ago. Not at all. I think the one thing that I think as a business we've been good at is we've been lucky in that when we started, it was the lockdown year and life changed. I've been lucky enough to live in Cornwall for the last 20 years. I love living in Cornwall, but what makes Cornwall lovely to live in, from my perspective, is that it's rural, it's quiet, we don't even have motorways in Cornwall. Okay, it's pretty rural. But from a business point of view, pre-COVID, that made it a royal pain to work and live in Cornwall because it's an hour and a half's drive in non-holiday traffic just to get to the nearest motorway. It's 2 hours to the nearest small city. It's 3 hours to the nearest medium-sized city. It's 7 hours to London. So face-to-face networking, face-to-face business contact pre-COVID was very, very time consuming. Now, of course, we've all got video calls of high quality, and you can have meetings with people all over the world with no travel time and no travel cost. And one of the things that's really worked well for us is online networking events. And it's worked well for two reasons. It's worked well because it's got our name out there and we have picked up referrals and business from it. But that's secondary. The best thing that's happened to us in terms of online networking is you're meeting people from different backgrounds, different age groups, different experiences. And I picked up early on AI, not because I'm clever, but because I came across people in the tech sector who started talking about ChatGPT and what's happening and what's happening. And then I didn't even know Zoom existed before 2020. Personally, it
Yeah.
was through an online, yeah, it was through a face-to-face networking event in between, I think, if memory serves me correctly, the second and the third COVID lockdown in the UK. That somebody mentioned to me about Zoom and Teams and Go and what have you. I'm like, what are you talking about? I was used to WhatsApp calls. That was the limit of my technology. So
Yeah.
it's been brilliant. It's never been easy. And let's face it, I'm very confident about the future because the technology like video calls and AI and what else is to come, AI agents and what have you, it's never been easier for anyone to get or to develop an international dimension to their business. It's never been easier to have overseas clients and overseas suppliers. The world really is everybody's oyster because if I can't remember the last time I jumped on an online networking call that everybody was in the UK. There's always somebody in Florida or somebody in Halifax, Nova Scotia, or somebody in Spain or somebody in Greece or South Africa or Dubai. It's the way of the world. The problem
Yeah.
is that the banking system is still stuck in the 20th century. So one of the things we often hear from clients, new clients, is their experience of that international dimension of business has been not as smooth as it could be. And that's because you could have the greatest product in the world. You could do a really good service level. But if the mechanics, like the boring day-to-day mechanics of sending out an invoice and receiving payment, is complicated, there's always a temptation for the other side to go, Gaurav, I really like you. I love your service, but honestly, paying your monthly invoice is a pain. I'm just going to go back to my local supplier. And that's where I think a lot of our growth at Cosmos is going to come from. Trying to find low personalized payment solutions to make sure that you don't have those conversations. That your product is good, your service is good, and paying you is as easy as paying the local supplier.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you talked about a lot of interesting points. And I think like one takeaway is that technology should be used to make our lives easier. Like you talked about Zoom, where before COVID, it was pain in the ass to basically, have to go in person everywhere. But now you can expand your business
That's right.
globally. And also with AI, now you could be much more productive, but
Yeah.
in the end, the things that humans love, which is like, one-to-one, face-to-face kind of
Yeah.
interaction, even though it's through video calls, that is still what humans should be doing and
Absolutely.
optimizing for.
That's right.
And then the second interesting point I loved about is there are still a lot of gaps, doing business globally in terms of how the banking system is. So what do you think is the future for banking? Is it crypto, digital coins, stable coins? I mean,
Sure.
what do you think is the future to make banking easier?
I think crypto. I mean, we don't deal in crypto. We're not licensed to deal in crypto, but it's a huge industry, and chances are it's only going to get bigger because it's an alternative solution to the fiat central bank system. And given the way lots of governments around the world are borrowing money like it's party time, well, you only will need another 2008 style crash, and the allure of crypto will get even higher than it already is. And the economy tends to go in cycles, so chances are there will be another 2008. It won't be to do with the housing market, it might be with the bond market, it might be with the government debt market. Who knows? I hope we never get rid of cash. I don't think we will. It's really interesting, at least in the UK, up until 2019, the use of cash in the banking system was going down year by year. It was like a downward staircase. Every year was going down. Every year since 2020, the use of cash has gone up, which is interesting to me because we're all encouraged to go contactless and not use notes because you know of the potential for transmission of viruses and things. I think the solution, I mean, let's face it, there's 8.5 billion human beings thereabouts in the world. There are vast parts of the world that are seriously underbanked, like South America, like Africa, like certain parts of Southeast Asia. There are even amongst the G7 there is still a situation in the United States, in Canada, in Australia, just to think of three off the top of my head, where a handful of banks still have a 90% market share. So there's going to be multiple answers. There's not going to be just one answer. It's just going to be crypto that's going to solve everything, or cash, or tokenization, or what have you. There's going to be multiple solutions. And I think that'll be great for clients because multiple solutions means there will be enough differentiation for every client to have something that makes sense to them. I have clients, in their 70s and 80s who are not confident on IT. So, like you said, video calls is really important to them because I might not be in the same room as them, but I am in the same room as them because they can see me, they can see I'm not reading from a script, and they get that human interaction, and I can guide them through certain things, or me and my team can guide them through certain things. Other people are very happy to use, contactless payments or whatever the case may be. So I think the more solutions, variety is the spice of life, they say. And I think that's right with any system. I'm very wary of centralization. I think centralization is very good for people working in that industry because it makes life easy, but terrible for clients. Whereas the more differentiation there is, the more choices clients have, the more each client will should be able to find something that kind of like fits their individual priorities and their individual criteria to a greater or lesser extent. You know, I think I look back and, my mum was a seamstress, and I remember growing up that she worked in haute couture for, fashion designers. And I always remember her saying as a child growing up that the problem with haute couture is when you get an off-the-peg suit or an off-the-peg dress or what have you, one size fits all doesn't fit anybody well. That she had an endless supply of work because somebody bought a suit or somebody bought or whatever a garment, and it needed taking up, it needed taking out, it needed taking in, it needed up, down, sideways, and all, because we're all individuals. And I guess that has always been in my head because I grew up in that environment to think that, okay, even with banking services, to have an idea of, let's make it nice and simple, one centralized system, everybody must use X. Great for the people who run X, but the chances of that being the right answer for 8.5 billion people, I would suggest, is probably nil. The
Yeah,
more
yeah,
choices people have, the more chances are each of us will find something that kind of like fits our priorities to a greater or lesser extent.
yeah, for sure. So follow up to that is, with AI getting really good, now you could see AI making videos which look pretty realistic. And now that you're talking to a screen, how far are we from, AI looking like an exact human acting exactly? Because it's going to have a lot more data. And like you said, it's already pretty good at research. So do you think that's the future, or do you think humans are still going to look for more of a human connection? Maybe humans would always be able to tell, and they would still want more of a flawed human like them than like a perfect AI system. Which, which one do you think it's going to be? Like,
Think technology always runs ahead of regulations. And certainly on this side of the pond in the UK, what we're seeing now is a lot of the introduction of AI scams where the videos do look realistic, or somebody goes on certain social media sites and sees a video purporting to be from a well-known scientist or a well-known business person advocating whatever the product is. And some people will always be susceptible to that. The regulators will then come running behind and try and get things organized. So for that reason alone, I always think there's nothing wrong with AI agents, and great that the technology continues to evolve because in certain situations, it will be the best solution for certain clients in certain situations. But we're one thing that, that became very obvious during COVID is we're social animals. Humans are social animals. So however clever AI gets, however clever the hologram gets or the AI video gets, there will always be a need for the human touch. There'll always be a need
yeah,
for human contact, ideally face to face. But failing that, some way. And I'm sure somebody in the AI space will work out some way or some gadgets or some app that clients will be able to use to be able to tell whether the person on the screen is a real human being or an AI video.
Yeah.
So
And
technology will always find a solution in the end.
yeah, yeah, like you said, regulators would, get behind, maybe make laws that you need to declare what's AI and what's not AI. There will be scams, and there have always been scams,
Of
so
course.
that's not nothing new. And
No.
some people would be susceptible, but I think
Yeah.
humans will evolve with technology, and I think there will always be a need for that human connection. Totally
Yeah.
agree. Well, final question is, what lessons have you learned as an entrepreneur? I know you're also into sports. So are there inspirations you take from sports into, your leadership skills, and overall, what lessons, what are your top lessons as an entrepreneur, and, what are some of the inspirations you find it from?
I think two things come to mind, Gaurav. The first one is I remember when I first got my first management position. Okay, I was 26 years old and I got the management position because I was good at my job. I had no management experience whatsoever. I got no training. I got no mentorship. And all of a sudden, I went home on a Friday being very good at my job, had the weekend. I came in on Monday and I was in charge of a group of 12 people, all older than me, all more experienced than me. And I'm like, okay, it's like the difference. I know you're a Chelsea fan. It's like just because you're a football player doesn't necessarily qualify you to be a football manager. Same sport, but completely different skill set. And the only thing that saved the day for me was the fact that I'd always played a lot of team sports. And so I knew from that team sport environment, whether it be the training field or or the match or in the dressing room, that everybody's an individual. You can't treat everybody the same way. Some people, to motivate them, they need an arm around their shoulder. Some people need a kick up the bum. How do I get motivated? That's simple. Just tell me I can't do something, and I'll do it just to prove you wrong. That's my personality. But that doesn't work for everybody. So I learned at a very, very early age in my teens, even long before I started, in the city of London at the age of 19, that we're all individuals and you cannot treat everybody the same way. No broad brushstrokes. Everybody's an individual. And to get the best out of people, you need to treat them like the individual they are. Because if you don't, it's just not going to work. It'll fall apart. Or people will stay in the job just as long as they need to before they find something else. And then you've got a revolving door of staffing level, which quickly becomes a nightmare because it's such a waste of training time, a waste of everybody's time, let alone the actual, financial costs of paying HR fees and everything else, or recruitment fees and what have you. So that was one lesson. And the second big lesson that I learned, again, goes back to my dear mum, who used to have a saying, and the older I get, the more sense this makes. And the saying was, even a broken clock is right twice a day. And the reason that's become important is that I remember when she started saying that to me, I was a teenager and, I was pretty wild for a period of time. I grew up in East End of London, which still is a very interesting part of the world, shall we say, never mind 40, 50 years ago. And yeah, I was pretty street smart. I was pretty wild. And I started clashing with my father, as lots of teenagers do. And I remember my mum saying to me, son, I remember one particular time, I honestly can't remember what the situation was or the argument was. That's long forgotten. But I remember her coming into my room and going, you're not wrong, but always remember, even a broken clock is right twice a day. And what I've picked up from that over the years is it's very easy to come to a conclusion in a situation or with certain people. And it's very easy to then dismiss them. They don't know what they're talking about. And that's so dangerous because they might not know what they're talking about. You might be right, and they don't know what they're talking about subject A. But it doesn't mean they're clueless on subjects A to Z. And you can miss a
Mm,
lot of information. If I look at what Cosmos Currency Exchange is today, it's a very different animal to what it started off 6 years ago. That's normal. But the interesting thing is, why is it different? Is it because of my brilliant blue sky thinking plan, business plan in 2020. Not at all. The growth areas have come from listening to people and picking up and doing research and picking up on where the world is going and listening to, a client phones up complaining about something. It might be 5 o'clock in the afternoon. You're tired. It's the end of the week. It's very easy to say complaining client. Very easy to do. And we've all done it, including myself. Of course, we've all done it. We're all human. But you can actually turn that around and go, oh, that's interesting. If that client's having a problem with this, how many other clients could have the same problem? How big could this problem be? And is there a solution? And if there is a solution, is there a solution that is so unique that hasn't really got a market? Or is there a solution that I can actually commoditize? All because you had a different mental attitude to that phone call at 10 to 5 on a Friday afternoon when you just want to go home.
Well, yeah, I think these are such amazing lessons, which I think the world is forgetting as we are going like more close to, we're relying more on technology. And
Yeah.
I think
Yes.
sort of relying on these, dare I say, old school thought process. And,
They're
or
allowed.
maybe a better way of saying it is going back to the roots on what made humans amazing and what made humans connect with each other more over the years. All those lessons are still true and that they're going to get even more important in the age of AI. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Tony. Well, all the best with Cosmos. I'm rooting for it because it's such a unique angle of doing entrepreneurship, and all the best in
Thank
future.
you.
And it was a pleasure talking to you.
Pleasure was on my part, and thank you very much for the opportunity.